In 1944, the world's major economies gathered in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire, and agreed on a new global financial system. Every major currency would be pegged to the United States dollar, and the United States dollar would be backed by gold, convertible at a fixed rate of $35 per ounce. It was a simple deal. The dollar's value was real because you could exchange it for something real. It worked for about 25 years. Then in 1971, President Nixon closed the gold window. The United States had been printing dollars faster than its gold reserves could back them, partly to fund the Vietnam War. Foreign governments had started quietly converting their dollars to gold. The reserves were draining. So Nixon ended the convertibility. The dollar was no longer backed by gold. And an obvious question arose: what is the dollar backed by now? The answer was arranged quietly in 1974, and it changed the entire global financial system in ways that most people still don't fully understand. In July 1944, representatives from 44 nations gathered in a small hotel in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire. Out of months of tense negotiation, a new monetary order took shape. The world's currencies would be pegged to the United States dollar, and the dollar itself would be pegged to gold at $35 per ounce. This arrangement was not just about numbers on paper. It was about trust. Gold was the anchor. If you held dollars, you held a claim on something real, something universally valued. The United States promised foreign governments they could always exchange their dollars for gold at that fixed rate. That promise, written into Treasury Circular number 571 and the Articles of Agreement for the new International Monetary Fund, became the backbone of global finance. The logic was simple. The dollar would serve as the world's reserve currency because it was as good as gold. Other countries did not have to hold massive gold reserves anymore. They could hold dollars and know those dollars could be turned into gold at any time. The International Monetary Fund and the World Bank, both born out of Bretton Woods, helped enforce this system and keep it stable. For decades, this arrangement worked. The United States had the world's largest economy, the deepest financial markets, and the biggest gold reserves. As economist Barry Eichengreen later put it, the dollar's credibility rested on a tangible promise: convertibility into gold. Not just faith in American power or policy. But that stability came with a hidden cost. The entire system depended on the United States maintaining enough gold to back the dollars in circulation. As long as everyone believed in the promise, the machine ran smoothly. But what happens when the promise is stretched too far? When the world's demand for dollars outpaces the gold in American vaults? That question would haunt policymakers for years, and when the answer finally arrived, it would upend the very foundation of the global order. On August 15th, 1971, President Nixon addressed the nation with a blunt announcement. The United States would suspend the dollar's convertibility into gold. With a single executive order, the anchor that had held the world's monetary system in place for nearly 3 decades was gone. Foreign governments holding billions in dollars could no longer exchange them for gold at $35 an ounce. The promise that had made the dollar as good as gold dissolved overnight. Why did it happen so abruptly? The numbers told a stark story. The US had run persistent deficits, financing wars and welfare at home and abroad. By 1971, gold reserves had shrunk to a level that could no longer back the flood of dollars in circulation. Treasury memos and Federal Reserve reports from the period show a mounting sense of alarm. France, Germany, and other nations were lining up to convert their dollars for gold, draining American vaults with every transaction. The credibility of the dollar, once unquestioned, evaporated in a matter of weeks. But the real crisis was just beginning. Without gold, what would give the dollar value in the eyes of the world? That question hung over Washington as the oil markets began to convulse. In October 1973, Arab members of OPEC imposed an oil embargo against the United States, and several allies in response to United States support for Israel during the Yom Kippur War. Oil prices quadrupled within months, gas lines snaked through American cities, inflation surged, and the United States economy teetered. Suddenly, oil, not gold, became the world's most sought-after commodity, and the power to set its price rested with a handful of oil-exporting nations, led by Saudi Arabia. Daniel Yergin, the energy historian, later described this moment as the turning point when oil became a diplomatic weapon. The embargo forced Washington to recognize that control over energy supplies could determine the fate of economies and governments. The old system was broken, and the world needed a new anchor for money and trade. The stakes could not have been higher. Without a replacement, the dollar risked becoming just another paper currency. As the crisis deepened, United States officials began searching for a new arrangement, one that would quietly restore global demand for dollars and secure America's financial future in a world where oil, not gold, now set the rules. In July 1974, a small American delegation arrived at King Faisal's summer palace in Taif. At its head was Treasury Secretary William Simon, carrying a message from Washington that was both urgent and delicate. The United States, still reeling from the oil embargo and the collapse of gold convertibility, needed a new foundation for the dollar's role in the world. Simon's meetings with King Faisal and senior Saudi officials were not about formal treaties or public announcements. Instead, they revolved around a simple but powerful proposal. Saudi Arabia would price its oil exclusively in dollars, and in return, the United States would guarantee the kingdom's security and open its financial markets to Saudi investment. Diplomatic cables from the Foreign Relations of the United States Archive show that Simon pressed for two things: the use of the dollar as the sole currency for Saudi oil sales, and a commitment to recycle the resulting dollar surpluses back into US Treasury securities. Saudi leaders, wary of global scrutiny, insisted on discretion. The agreement would be a private understanding, not a signed contract. On July 21st, Simon described it only as a new era of economic cooperation. But behind closed doors, the terms were clear. Oil would be anchored to the dollar, and the dollar would be anchored not to gold, but to the world's most vital commodity. The machinery for this arrangement was set in motion quietly, through confidential channels and backdoor financial deals, leaving most of the world unaware that a new monetary order had just begun. Oil priced in dollars created a silent engine for global finance. Every nation that needed energy first needed dollars, whether they were buying from Saudi Arabia, Nigeria, or Russia. This was not just a matter of convenience, it was a system that forced the world's central banks to hold vast reserves of United States currency. By 2023, the International Monetary Fund's COFA data put the dollar's share of global reserves at 58%, far outpacing the euro, the yen, or the yuan. Why does this matter? Because it is not United States economic output alone that keeps the dollar on top. It is the structural demand built into the oil trade, a demand engineered in the aftermath of the 1974 deal. Economists like Brad Setzer have traced these flows in detail. When oil is invoiced in dollars, exporting countries accumulate those dollars and recycle them, often by buying United States Treasury bonds. The numbers are staggering. Foreign holders owned $7.5 trillion in treasuries at the end of 2023. Oil exporters alone account for over $1 trillion of that total. The elasticity model from Al-Monif estimates that a 10% drop in dollar-invoiced oil could reduce global dollar reserves by about 7%. That means even small shifts in oil pricing ripple through the entire financial system, tightening the flow of cheap credit that has fueled American deficits for decades. The petrodollar system is not just about oil. It is about the machinery that lets the United States finance itself on the world's terms, not its own. Rising interest rates and persistent inflation are not just numbers on a chart. They touch everything from mortgage payments to the cost of groceries. When foreign demand for US Treasuries softens, yields climb, and the cost of borrowing across the economy follows. In 2023, Saudi Arabia settled its first oil shipment to China in yuan, and BRICS expanded to include new major energy exporters. These signals, while still small in scale, have prompted central banks to quietly diversify their reserves, shifting a sliver away from dollars toward gold, euros, and yuan. Eswa Prasad notes that every non-dollar oil contract weakens the automatic, structural demand that has kept US borrowing costs low for decades. Yet Mohammed El-Erian cautions against panic, reminding that the dollar still anchors most global trade and finance, and that transitions in reserve currency status take years, not months. The real pressure point is not an overnight collapse, but a steady tightening, a world where the US must compete harder to attract buyers for its debt, and where inflation and interest rates become more sensitive to shifts in global sentiment. The dollar's dominance was never just about economic might. It was about a silent pact, oil, and security. Now, as nations quietly test new ways to trade outside that system, the direction matters more than the speed. Reserve currencies don't collapse overnight, but tides once turning rarely reverse.